right, welcome to Talking Investing. I'm Tom. As always, this is not financial advice. Today, I want to talk about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners, and I want to talk about the panic that's going on. Yesterday was a brutal day for the Bitcoin miners. I want to go through that. Also, CleanSpark put out some news that I want to talk about. A bunch of the Bitcoin miners put out their monthly operational reports, so there's a lot to go through. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. We talk about Bitcoin and the miners all the time. Also, if everybody could please smash the like button. We are going for 300 likes on this video. I want to thank everybody for smashing the like button on yesterday's video. It did help a lot. So with that said, let's talk about what's going on with Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners. I just want to start out by saying it definitely seems there is panic surrounding the beginning of September here. All through the month of August, we talked about September. Everybody seemed to be pressing the panic button that September was going to be a disaster, both in Bitcoin and the market. So far, we're very early in September, but the first trading day for equities of September was a disaster. Yesterday, the stock market got beat up very badly. The NASDAQ was down over 3%. The Russell was down over 3%. And I mentioned the Russell because the Bitcoin miners tend to trade more in line with the Russell 2000. So those were big moves to the downside. Nvidia was down over 9%. It had the worst day in the history of any stock in the stock market as it pertains to how much market cap it lost. So, that was a devastating day. We keep breaking that record, by the way, probably, 5 of the worst days ever from a market cap standpoint have been in the last year, and that just speaks to the volatility that's going on. It also speaks to the fact that I think there was mass panic going into September. So I'm not sure how the rest of September is going to play out. I will do a separate video on that, but so far the panic has been real. Today, as I'm making this video, the market did just open. The Bitcoin miners have calmed down a little bit. There's some green, there's some red. Bitcoin did take another move down to an important line of support that we'll see if it holds, and we'll talk about some lines below that. Okay, so before we move on, let's just revisit yesterday. This is a screenshot of yesterday's big board of the Bitcoin miners. You can see almost all the Bitcoin miners were down double digits. The ones that weren't were very close. Marathon was down 8.6%. CleanSpark was the worst mover on the day, down 15.6%. They did put out a press release after the market closed on Friday, and I think you're seeing that reaction yesterday and a little bit of a continuation so far this morning. So we'll go through what that was. That was the worst mover on the day, down 15.6%, but Riot was down around 10%. Iron was down 12.7%. So you can go down the list and take a look and find your Bitcoin miner or miners that you're invested in or considering investing in. And again, I want to point out, none of this is financial advice. Please, you guys, do your own due diligence. This red board right here from yesterday is what we talk about all the time on this channel. These stocks are incredibly volatile, and they've also been in a downward trend for months now. So this is, a falling knife to some extent for a lot of these stocks. So please invest with caution, be careful. So we do see these days. This is not the first time that this has ever happened. However, I do know for a lot of you, it's a natural reaction. These days are awful. So even though we know that they happen and we know they're coming, and there are other green days that look, the same way, these are very, very difficult to get through. I suspect we're going to find out that a lot of retail investors got flushed out of the Bitcoin miners yesterday. But having said that, retail was not the only one selling Bitcoin. I want to go through what the ETFs did yesterday. So if we take a look at this is what the Bitcoin ETFs did on a daily basis. You'll see September 2nd, Monday, the US equity markets was closed, so that was a 0. But yesterday, on Tuesday, this was one of the worst days we've ever had for the ETFs, and it was the worst day in a long time. $287.8 million of outflows. There were no Bitcoin ETFs that actually had an inflow yesterday. So they were all at either 0 or in the red. Fidelity had $162 million of outflow. It's worth noting that BlackRock was at 0. So it does seem like BlackRock has some customers that make up the gap and buy to get themselves to 0, because so many times you'll see 0 here on August 30th, 0, 0. So they did go red one day. I think they've only had 2 days since these opened in January that they've had a red day. So BlackRock has been by far the biggest buyer, and you'll see they're at almost almost $21 billion of Bitcoin. So that is more than double the second best, which is Fidelity, which is closing in on $10 billion. So these Bitcoin ETFs have made a lot of progress, but yesterday was a big sell-off from the ETFs. With that said, if we go to the chart, this dotted line is where Bitcoin was when the US equity markets closed on Friday. And then this gold line is where Bitcoin was when the US equity markets closed yesterday. So that's after a long weekend. So you'll see on a day where the NASDAQ was down 3%, the Russell 2000 was down 3%, oil was down 3 or 4%, everything got wrecked yesterday. Bitcoin was actually only down 1% at the end of the day yesterday. Now, after hours, we did have another move to the downside. So you'll see from yesterday's close, from Tuesday's close of the equity markets, through the time that I'm making this video, Bitcoin's down around 2.78%, so somewhere just under 3%. This chart's on the 15-minute time frame, so you can see we were hanging steady at this line of support that I had here at around 57,800. As soon as that broke out, it ran straight down to the next line of support. This is actually, in my opinion, a much stronger line of support. So since it rushed down to this, we have been struggling on either side of this ever since. So the bulls and the bears are in a fight right now at around this 56,500. And if I go to the one-day time frame, you'll see that line traces back to kind of the flash crash we had on May 1st. So that was a new lower low. Since then, we've had two more lower lows. We did get down to 53,500. So that is the next point that I would be looking for. If 56,500 can't hold, there's not a lot in the middle. So that's the next spot that I would be looking for. Then we did have on August 5th, that was a Monday, a panic flash crash down to 49,000. So I personally, I'm not necessarily looking for that line, but I mention it because, you know, we do need to acknowledge it could potentially be in play. If we go below that, then that would be another lower low. All of this is inside of this channel right here. So this is basically the last 6 months. At the beginning of this, you're going to see this is where Bitcoin hit its new all-time high back in the middle of March. That was just under $74,000. Since then, we have been trading sideways, up and down, inside of a descending wedge pattern. So we have not broken out of the top or the bottom of this on a daily candle close, but you'll see if we look at the bottom, we have candle wicked below this several times. So it would be nice to avoid having a lower low. For the time being, this does seem to be holding up, and you'll see this is somewhere around $53,000. The bottom of this wedge right now is somewhere around $53,000 the way I have it drawn out. And you know, everybody will have this a little bit differently. That really lines right up with this white line here at $53,499. So somewhere around 53.5 would be that next line of support that I would be looking for. What obviously we would all prefer is that if I go back to the 15-minute time frame, if we can just hold on here at 56,500, that would be nice. I will tell you, with the pessimism that's out there right now, I'm not sure, right? The bias tends to be to the downside. So sometimes you just have to go with the momentum. And right now, until further notice, there does seem to be some panic and pressure to the downside. I would be interested to see what the ETFs do the rest of the week. Are they going to come in and provide some support at these levels? Okay, with all that said, let's get to CleanSpark. CleanSpark did do an SEC filing, and the market did not like this at all. So if you remember, CleanSpark was down almost 16% yesterday. It was the worst performer of the Bitcoin miners on the day. So essentially what they let us know is they are going to have a special meeting for the stockholders in October. And the main purpose of this is this item number 1 right here: to approve and amend to our current articles of incorporation to increase the number of shares of common stock authorized for issuance from 300 million shares to 600 million shares. So this would not be them issuing and diluting immediately. What this is the number of authorized shares. So they are closing in on that 300 million shares that they have currently authorized. As of the June 30th financial statements, they were at about 225 million shares issued. So essentially what this is looking to do is set them up, you know, hopefully for the next several years. This is a company that has very big growth plans. We should expect more stock dilution. If we look at what their plans are, they've pretty much told us they have massive growth plans. So there's a lot of CapEx expenses left to come Also, for the last several months in a row, they've been hodling 99% of the Bitcoin that they mine. So, they're not getting any revenue from their Bitcoin. So they got to pay for their direct expenses, they've got to pay for their overhead, and they've got to pay for all of their CapEx. So, the way that they have been doing that is through at the market offerings. So this really scared people. Oftentimes there's a big move to the downside when this happens, and usually that is a short-term thing, because remember, this isn't actually issuing any shares of stock at all. And in my opinion, I know a lot of people are going to be freaked out by this, but in my opinion, this is telling us what we already knew, which is that, they have continued plans to have capital expenditures to grow their business. So let me know in the comments what you think about this. I know stock dilution with the Bitcoin miners is probably the #1 issue that I get on this channel in the comments section. This frustrates a lot of people. People are very conflicted about this. These companies do need to grow to keep up with the halving, to keep up with the increase in difficulty level and the growing overall network hash rate. So there is a balancing act. What I look for is, are these companies getting their money's worth out of the stock dilution that they're doing? Is their growth in exahash and Bitcoin mining exceeding their growth in the number of shares outstanding as a percentage? So that's how I personally look at this. So again, none of this is financial advice, but this was the big news for CleanSpark. This is what went on, and this is what caused the big move to the downside. I'm just going to show you one more quick chart. There are 5 Bitcoin miners that have put out their monthly operational reports. I will do some deep dives on those and look at the actual reports themselves. But for the moment, I just want to zoom out and take a look. You're going to see this was May, June, and July. So now we're in August, we're getting monthly operational reports. So Marathon put their report out, 673 Bitcoin mined. That is down from 692. That's down 3%. But what I want you to know is all 5 of the companies that have reported did mine less Bitcoin in August than they did in July. And if you remember, on July 31st, so one day before August started, there was a 10.5% increase in the difficulty level for mining Bitcoin. So we talked about this on the channel over the course of the month. I did expect most of the Bitcoin miners to mine less Bitcoin in the month of August than in July, mainly because of that gigantic increase in difficulty level. Now, in the middle of the month, that pulled back a little bit, but overall, much higher difficulty level. Now, I do have 2 Bitcoin miners that I believe have a good chance and probably should beat their July numbers. And that's due to the fact that they had a lot of growth in their infrastructure and they got a lot of exahash online, or at least that's what they were representing they were going to do in August. And those 2 companies are RIOT. So RIOT mined 370 Bitcoin last month. I'm looking for them to beat that number. So we'll see what happens. And then Iris Energy had a massive amount of exahash come online. So they mined 222 Bitcoin last month, and I'm looking for them to beat that number. Otherwise, these moves of 3% or 6% down, I'm not that worried about. And you will see if we go down the list. So CleanSpark reported 478. That was also a 3% move to the downside. Bitfarms had an 8% move to the downside with 233 Bitcoin mined. TeraWulf mined 184 versus the previous month of 195. That was 6%. And then CIFR mined 160 versus 178. That was a 10% move to the downside. So we're going to keep our eye on this. And again, I will do some deep dives and go a little bit deeper into the numbers, because the number of Bitcoin mined is just one number that's reported in these operational reports. There is a lot of information as these companies do give us a monthly update. So I just wanted to get a video out because yesterday, definitely there was a lot of panic in the market. There was a lot of downward pressure on the Bitcoin miners. That is part of what's been going on for months. So I hope you guys are hanging in there. I hope you guys appreciate this video and got some information out of this. Just a reminder, we do have a live stream every Friday after the markets close. So I hope to see you guys there. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to smash the like button. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.